All right, hi everybody. Obviously, my video that I did last night didn't hold up to the rigors of, well, it was Adele that recorded it, so there you go. Going to record it on my iPad today, so I'm going to go quickly through the information and get this up to you as quick as possible. So we left off talking about Louisiana. This is chapter 9, section 2, the buying of Louisiana, Jefferson buying Louisiana. We have to look at exactly what's going on here. On your first slide where it talks about moving west, America had a agreement with the Spanish to use the port of New Orleans. They had gained the Louisiana Territory along with some other French islands and stuff for helping the English out in the French and Indian War. And of course the English, as Americans began climbing over the Appalachian Mountains, despite the fact of the proclamation of 1763 that said we can't, we did it anyway. They began making money by sending their products, their goods, their things that they were making on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains down the Ohio River Valley, down the Mississippi to the port of New Orleans. So Britain first negotiated a treaty with Spain to use the port of New Orleans. And of course, after the American Revolution, as literally hundreds of thousands of Americans flooded over the Appalachian Mountains into what is today Kentucky and Tennessee in particular, we renegotiated that treaty with Spain. But by 1800, Napoleon stomping around Europe, he had taken Spain, reclaimed the lands that had belonged to France before the French and Indian War. He reclaimed the southern half of Louisiana. He, of course, didn't get back Canada because Canada was still in the hands of the English, but he got it back. He got some islands back. And, of course, he had plans on a future American empire. Honestly, I believe that if Napoleon, if we weren't friends with France, that Napoleon would have probably attacked the United States and tried to capture the United States. He believed in making a new France in America, the American France. So, it was really important to him. But, of course, it messed us up. By the French getting control of New Orleans, suddenly the people on the other side of the Appalachian Mountain couldn't get their goods to market. So, make a long story short, we needed to deal with France at this point in time. Due to the fact that France and Europe were constantly at war, and obviously Europe was not going to settle down at any point in time, Jefferson believed that we didn't need to negotiate a treaty, that we simply needed to buy the city outright from the French now, before the French lost it again to Spain or Russia or whoever was going to be the next owner of New Orleans. He thought that America should just go ahead and buy it from Napoleon, along with some territory in the western half of Florida. To that effect, why did we need it? Well, as I said, Americans needed to make money. And the Appalachian Mountains were a major barrier for most people because literally half the year, the Appalachian Mountains are a pretty tough country. There's about 3 months out of the year that pretty much, from December to end of February, those mountain passes were pretty much off limits. You were snowed in. There was too big a even if you weren't having a bad winter, it was too big of a risk to get halfway up or halfway across or halfway back down just to find out that it snowed on you, and then suddenly you're sort of like the Donner Party, looking at one another going, what can we eat? Don't want that happening. So most people shied away from that. And also getting the goods across those mountains increased the cost. And by the time it would get to the East Coast, to the shipping lanes on the East Coast of America, goods brought over the Appalachian Mountains would have doubled in value, doubled in cost, and all the profit would have disappeared. So getting it down the Mississippi was the only way that people on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains were going to make an economic turn. So we had to have that city. To that end, we will send an ambassador. Jefferson will send Robert Livingston, and later he'll send James Monroe with him to negotiate with Napoleon for New Orleans. He's going to offer him $10 million. Now that doesn't sound like a lot of money today, but back then that that was a big figure. That was a lot of money. When you consider that the entire American Revolution only cost $50 million, $10 million is a sizable chunk of change back then. That was a lot of money, especially when you consider the average American made less than $300 a year. So that idea of taking on that kind of income, that kind of debt for that city and of course that little part of Florida was a pretty hefty price to pay, but we felt that it was worth it. Fortunately for us and unfortunately for Napoleon, as I said earlier, Napoleon had plans on a world domination thing. He wanted to be a Dr. Evil, so forth and so on. He wanted to take over the world, and his American plan all centered around him using one island, what is today the island of Haiti, which was called Santo Domingo at that particular point in time in history. As the French had taken over that area, it was a sugarcane population, a lot of sugarcane plantations and stuff. And he was going to convert that basically to his base of operations in the New World. He's going to put a navy there. He's going to warehouse men and equipment and supplies for future, conquering. I'm sure he planned on going up and invading into Louisiana and taking that territory, possibly taking South America and some of those smaller islands away from Spain, despite the fact that Spain was sort of his anyway at this point in time. He was also obviously looking at taking out Canada. He really wanted to be in competition with the British Empire, with a French Empire that stretched even more vastly than what the English had occurred at that point in time in history. Unfortunately for him, when they took over Santo Domingo, they brought with them Enlightenment ideas, things like every man is created equal, rights, the inalienable rights that men have, the rights of man. John Locke's idea is that if the government exists for the protection of the people and to protect their natural rights, and if the government doesn't protect those natural rights, it is the obligation of the citizen to rise up and overthrow that government and replace it with a government that will protect their natural rights. Those type of things were, really inspirational, and this was part of being French. If you were a French colonist, you were expected to become French. It didn't matter whether it was in Africa or Asia or in America. You were expected to speak French, live French, think of French ideas, all that stuff. But with it comes a cost. And in this particular case, Napoleon kind of shoots himself in the foot because these Enlightenment ideas come home to Santo Domingo. And you can't really talk about, rights of man and every man is created equal when you have an 80% population that is, African slaves working on the plantation. You have 1 million people as slaves and, 100,000 that are not. And the average weapon of the, not the weapon, but the tool of the day in a sugarcane plantation, was the machete. To cut down the sugar cane and all that stuff, that was their, lots of those things laying around. So you can imagine what happens with rights of man, overthrow government, created equal kind of thing. And, you look at some angry people who want some payback. This is a bloody revolution. It will be led by a young African French person named Toussaint Louverture. His father was a diplomat. His mother was a slave. Due to the fact that his mother was a slave, he was illegitimate. But he did get educated. His father did love him. He sent him to school, had him educated, taught him how to do, pretty much everything a normal French citizen would do. Very equality there. But he's going to come back and he's going to lead this revolution. And when he does, it is going to be bloody. It's going to be quick, and France is going to lose. They'll rename the island Haiti. And of course, Louverture will become the de facto leader of Haiti, their first revolutionary leader. And of course, this will spark more revolutions throughout Central America and South America, including the revolution of Mexico when they rebel against Spain, and then all the way down. It's just the next 20 years are just gonna be constant revolutions all the way across Central and South America. The only place that pretty much didn't have a revolution, and that's is Brazil. Brazil was Portuguese. When Napoleon took Spain, he also took Portugal, and the king and his family fled Portugal and escaped to Brazil. While living in exile in Brazil, the young prince, son of the king, fell in love with the place. When the Napoleon, of course, we know in our European history classes from 7th grade that Napoleon will eventually lose. When that happens, the king of Portugal will be returning home from Brazil, but he leaves his son behind. At the same time, all these revolutions are happening in all these Spanish colonies throughout Central and South America. Of course, obviously, these ideas of rebellion will get to Brazil, but instead of having a really bloody revolution, it's not going to be that bad. They're going to simply go over to the young prince and say, hey, prince, we don't want to be part of Portugal anymore, and we would like you to be the first king of Brazil. And of course, he didn't have too hard of a choice there. You know, you think about Portugal's small little country back in Europe, rugged terrain, old dusty castles, not a whole lot of really influence in the world. And then there's Brazil. You know, you've got white sandy beaches and beautiful climate, beautiful people, and I mean, it's pretty much a no-brainer for him. He was like, go back to Europe or stay here in paradise. Yeah, so there you are. That pretty much ends the Central American part. But back to Napoleon. Santo Domingo's gone. You know, there's now the island of Haiti. His base of operation for his future American plans are destroyed. He's got some problems going on back in Europe. He's fighting in that area known over what is today Germany and Austria. He's fighting the Prussians. He's fighting the Russians. He's fighting the Dutch, Denmark. He's fighting the Polish. He's fighting the English. Everybody's kind of fighting him right there. And he needs money. He needs money bad because he's not punching through. He thought that it'd be a little easier to take on those areas. He's winning, but it's costing him heavily. So he needs more money, more men, more supplies, more everything. And what he doesn't need anymore is American soil. He does not need Louisiana. He does not need those islands in the Caribbean. They're pretty much doing nothing for him now because there are no future plans in the Americas for France. He's also in the process of building his Grande Armée, La Grande Armée Napoléon, in case any of you out there. This was his big, huge army that he will eventually use to punch into Russia in the winter. I mean, we know how that turns out. But he's, you know, destroying one army of his, fighting right now in Russia and Germany. And he's trying to build another army, and he needs money. He's got his navy doing stuff over here and then over there and trying to fight everybody. So he's in desperate hurt of some cash, and he has this land. So if you're looking on to your next side, the actual purchase of Louisiana, the Louisiana Purchase, Robert Livingston and James Monroe will travel to France. They'll meet with Charles Talleyrand. He had been the prime minister before Napoleon seized power and took control of France. Kudos to Talleyrand. He didn't lose his head because, you know, most people in France, if you're at the top and you're no longer at the top, it's because you got topped, you know, guillotined. So, you know, he was obviously quite the diplomat to be able to step down from prime minister status down to just ambassador status and keep his head. That was pretty impressive there. He will, at this point in time, have the joy of informing the American ambassadors and James Monroe, the Secretary of State, that, you know, you can buy New Orleans, but how would you feel about $5 million more? You can have all of Louisiana.